Los Angeles parking ticket. 2.5 weeks of groceries, 2 days of rent in the average LA apartment, eating out with your friends 6 times, 2 months of utilities, doing your laundry 30 times, a one-way plane ticket, 1 month's internet bill, almost 2 months of gym membership.
One Angelino venting about how expensive LA parking tickets are in a YouTube video. In related news, this Sunday is Easter, a day of chocolate, jelly beans, sunshine, and expensive parking. It's one of the busiest days of the year for public parks, and in Orange County, parks officials have decided to charge higher parking rates on the holiday. Well, here in LA, a similar move. This week, Mayor Eric Garcetti released his first budget, and part of his plan to bring in more revenue is to issue more parking tickets. Stephen Vincent is founder of the Los Angeles Parking Freedom Initiative. Welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you, Madeleine. Thanks for having me.
Well, what is the Parking Freedom Initiative?
Well, basically back in about November, I threw together some ideas that I had about reforming the parking system and took them to my local neighborhood council. And I wasn't expecting to really get much of a response, but in fact I was mobbed after the meeting by people encouraging me to continue. And I continued to take my ideas out to neighborhood councils and chambers of commerce, stakeholders organizations, and continued to get a lot of encouragement and a lot of ideas. We've collated those ideas, and we're in the process of narrowing them down into a package of reforms that we plan on putting on a ballot initiative for March 2015 citywide election.
So I assume you're not in favor of the mayor's plan to issue more parking tickets as a way to bring in more money for the city.
Well, that was actually a major disappointment because we've had conversations with the mayor's office, and we were really optimistic that they were able to see the wisdom of a shift in policy. In fact, now we're getting more of the same, and we're quite disappointed with that. Revenue-driven parking enforcement, it needs to end. There needs to be an end to the budgetary practice of parking violations revenue targeting.
Well, the city does need to raise money, doesn't it?
The city does need to raise money, but parking is a service that the city needs to provide, not a means to an end. It's a service in and of itself that ought to facilitate commerce, ease of transit, and livability for the residents and businesses of the city.
Right. Here's a devil's advocate question. Doesn't more or higher parking fees actually help in terms of encouraging people to use public transit?
I don't personally believe that the parking system and parking fines or fees should be used as a club to bludgeon people into changing their behavior. There are other ways of getting people to change their behavior through persuasiveness and through making the other options really good. If the other options were really good, then people would make better choices. So
what is the price now? What is the average price of a ticket?
Well, the lowest ticket is $58 right now, and an expired parking meter is $63. When you look at it in these terms, the average, a person who's making at or near minimum wage basically is robbed of an entire day's work for one of those tickets. And that we don't feel that meets a standard of reasonableness or fairness. We're proposing that a good standard might be the Bureau of Labor Statistics average hourly wage for the city, which comes in around $24 and change. And that might make a good cap for parking tickets that don't involve any kind of hazard to the public or don't involve handicap parking.
So $24 as the highest amount?
Yeah, that would be a proposed cap based on the average hourly wage. That 1 hour's worth of work for the average person would be sufficient incentive to get them to comply with the parking law, and I think that's reasonable. I think that would incentivize people sufficiently. The problem is that the city asks the question not what is necessary to incentivize people to comply with the law, but basically how much can we get away with. They look at their domain over the parking system essentially like a monopoly capitalist. How much will the market bear? How much can we get away with? That's the wrong question for a city government to be asking. They should be asking the question rather, what is necessary in order to gain compliance?
Well, and is there a law of diminishing returns in effect if parking tickets are so high, people just won't pay them?
There is that factor as well, and it's not just a question of not wanting to pay them. It's also a question of being able to pay them. For a lot of people who are basically paycheck to paycheck and getting by, they get that big $63 or $78 ticket. It goes in a drawer. They forget about it, and then several weeks later, that doubles. They look at it again after they get the notice in the mail, and they look at the decision of whether they're going to feed their kids or pay that ticket, and guess what they're going to choose? Feed the kids or pay the electric bill or whatever it happens to be. And that decision gets postponed until it becomes an even bigger disaster, eventually, meaning that they cannot, re-register their car at the DMV, and then that's going to result in even larger problems. And this is a very common thing. And if people are being forced to the wall in that way through something as simple as getting back to the meter a couple of minutes late, there's something wrong with the system, not something wrong with the people.
Where does LA fit in regards to other cities? Are we an outlier in terms of how much we charge for parking?
On the high end, not the highest, I believe, from what I understand, but we are on the high end. And it's not merely the size of the fines; it's the practices. That's what I want to focus on today. It's the budgetary practice of parking violations revenue targeting that is quite possibly the primary driving factor here, because what happens is the parking enforcement division basically gets a bill from the city that says, we expect you to collect this amount of money. That becomes a de facto target that they have to go out there and collect. And that basically changes the dynamics of the parking enforcement in incentivizing them to be very aggressive about issuing tickets. And essentially there's basically ticket them all and let God sort them out type of an approach out there, particularly when that's coupled with the fact that the Parking Violations Bureau routinely denies all appeals on the first go-round, because they know the vast majority of people simply do not have the time or the inclination to take it to the level of a hearing. Mm-hmm. And so they drop it, and therefore they either end up paying it or it ends up going on their DMV, causing them a great deal of grief later on.
Okay. So, we're going to have to end it there, unfortunately. A lot more to talk about. Stephen Vincent, founder of the Los Angeles Parking Freedom Initiative. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And if you do have thoughts on this, some ideas, I kind of think you might, you can leave us a voicemail at 1-844-PRESS-PLAY, or you can leave a comment on our Facebook page, KCRW's Press Play.